This is Barbell Conversations, a podcast that talks about strength, mindset, and everything else in between. I am your host, Dwayne, or bearded Breadfruit on social media. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Simon Pipe. We tackle conversations and topics such as the male ego, low self-esteem, and depression and anxiety in men, strength training, and what that looks like for self-help for men. Join this conversation, tap like, share it with some person, or keep it for yourself. And I hope to see you there. Let's get into it. I had this when I was coming here, I had like this way that I was supposed to introduce you, right? And I was just like, I can't be doing this, because in my mind, when I listened to the other podcasts and stuff that you did, it's like Simon hate people running late. I was like, well, he tardiness. So no, I ain't late. So I feel like I got pull up, or like just start thinking about all these things to introduce you and make it sound real lively and nice, because I wasting your time. So it's
no, I think I said in the other podcast that I was told that expectations are premeditated.
Yeah. That one hit hard. It was like, you know what, like everything I was planning for this week, it was like, I got these stuff that I want to say, and got the outline of these stuff that I want to talk about. I sent you the location, got the time and everything ready. I started up my school and everything that I had to start out for the week. Can't be late. I do everything I had to do today. I set out my day and then get to my clients and then get to my little boot camp and stuff that I'm doing. And then get home, had a nice rest, wake up in time, get the bus up in time. And I was still late. So I was like, shit, the
good Lord wanted me to have a breadfruit bowl.
I think so. I think it's fitting, right?
He gave me the time to go and get something.
That's what we're talking about. It's fitting, because you just sitting across the table from breadfruit, and I just feel like that is like the best thing that can ever happen today.
Yeah. I'm in agreement.
Yeah? It's been a while though, Simon. How's it going?
Yeah, it has. It's been going pretty well. Yeah, I've been busy.
You can see that.
Yeah.
I listened to all the interviews I did, and I watched the documentary, and I got the album on Spotify.
Sweet.
Yeah. So I mean, it has been going good, and I feel like a lot of the things that you're touching on, and a lot of things that you spoke about, are things that I just wanted to kind of continue in a sense, but not from the angle that most people will talk about. But at the same time, I just think it's a nice thing that you're doing, because the whole idea of me starting a podcast was just to be a bit more vulnerable. And I find the more guys that I speak to about the things that I want to do, and the more guys that I say things to when it comes to speaking about mental health or speaking about vulnerability, it seems like more guys are in agreement that is something that needs to be done, right? But I guess they too are a little fearful to have something like that. So to see you kind of like wear that vulnerability on like a badge or whatever, that in itself is already motivation enough to just continue with this, and just to see. So like, how has all that been in terms of like speaking that way, or having that kind of to speak about things that you've gone through over the last couple of, I guess, months, years
actually, yeah. So initially I was very fearful to talk about any of it,
right.
Just because of all of these stigmas attached to everything that I've been going through, addiction, mental health, recovery, all these things, there's a lot of stigma attached to all of them. And then I was just fearful that I may say something wrong. I feel like that's a big deal now, right? Like, if you say something wrong, you will get dragged for it. And I was so scared, like, what is it that I'm gonna say wrong, But the first interview I did was my friend Chantel reached out to me from another Bajan, and she asked if I would be willing to tell my story. And I told her yes. And I had been told previously by someone else in recovery that when we get opportunities to share our story, we should say yes.
Yeah.
And so I said yes, and she could tell you, I reached out to her after we filmed, and I was like, please, can you send me that video, because I am terrified, and she said, as a rule, I don't do that, but I will do it for you since the topic is so sensitive. So I shared about my journey, with recovery, relapsing, addiction, mental health, all the challenges. And what came out of that was that I realized that a lot of people are struggling and they want help, but they don't know. Like when I wanted help, I didn't know how to reach out for help, and I didn't know where to look for help. So after I did that interview, I realized there was a real void there. People are not talking about these things. And so then that's what spurred on, eventually me creating a documentary. The album was one of those things that just came about organically. I don't want to say by accident, I guess divine intervention, or I don't know how you want to look at that stuff, but I believe that was meant to happen. And then after the documentary and the album, then I went on Gems from Friends. And then I actually was on CBC last night.
I remember you told me about that, but I didn't get to catch it. I don't go on CBC anymore, but I did see all the others.
So they aired the documentary, and then we did a short panel where myself, my friend Victor, who's also in recovery, and a counselor from the National Council on Substance Abuse, Mosiah, he joined us. So we had a discussion, and then we had people call in, and again I realized like how much of a void there is there. People, a lot of people are struggling. But they just don't really know what to do.
See, that's the thing, because like you mentioned how the interview with Chantel and stuff, and you wanted to see it, right? My first recording here, I don't think this on the same level, obviously, because I don't think I shared a lot in the first interview. But my plan is with this podcast, Barbell Conversations, is to start sharing stuff like that, right? Or to start sharing things to be more open to the public. And in recording it, it hit home to the people that got to hear the little draft, snippet, whatever the case may be, even though it's not out yet. And I'm still like freaking out about it. And I remember sending it to a friend, that's the draft, and she was all like, but what you sung this way, or like what you feel like you so drony, or like you talking like you can't read and whatever. And that is a part for me, a part of the vulnerability, or the part of the being vulnerable aspect. And one thought was to come and redo the whole thing. But I feel as though, you know what, I think it needs to be out there just like that.
How it is.
Okay. Because then people get to see how I kind of fight through this. Because my whole aim is not to come here as though I know everything, or as though I have the answers to everything. But I definitely want, through these conversations and through interaction with people, and through people seeing me, that it kind of breaks down the barriers and the stigmas and stuff attached to it, because you can see that. And I think that kind of leads into the first thing I wanted to bring up. In the last recording I had, I made a statement saying that the male ego is like the most fragile thing on earth, right? And I don't know if it was something that somebody said before, but I personally believe it, because it just seems so easily broken. And I thought it was just so fitting with the whole gym narrative, because people look at me and they see like, this man real strong here. Or he can lift a real weight. You know what I mean? Or like, this man deadlift, they're real heavy. And I really personally don't think I deadlift that heavy compared to some people I know. But then everything in context too, right?
You would be in the top. You would be very high in the percentage. I
would be somewhere up there. But I mean, like, based on the people that
you might not win a Guinness World Record, but you would be in probably the top 1 to 5%.
Probably. Because it's definitely more than. But that being said, like, that in itself plays some role in egos, whether it might be this grander thing or it's a little less. And I just feel that in itself too, when people look at me, they think he may not be suffering with anxiety, depression, and stuff like that. I think people characterize me based on my strength, and that strength is not linked to anything intrinsic. For example, that's not linked to anything going on in between my ears or whatever.
Okay.
They see that and they see he's strong, so maybe in everything else in life,
right.
he has this sense of like, strength. So like, I think my question is like, what role does that play in, I guess, self-perception or like just your own personal growth? Like, you find that you have to battle with your ego at all, or?
I don't really know. I'm learning. I'm trying to figure it out because, yeah, it's interesting because I think so. I've always struggled with very low self-esteem and low self-worth.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't mean that there's not an ego in there. It's just, it's not operating in the way that we think of someone as being egotistical. You know, when you think of someone as being egotistical, you think of them as they think they're better than everyone. And I've been the complete opposite of that. I've always thought, I literally think I'm smaller than everyone.
Me too.
As an actual, like it's only been in recent times that some people who are closer to me have said, that's nonsense, right? and in recent times I've actually been challenging it. Like I'll when I'm in the gym, for sure, I see other people lifting and I think, oh my God, like this person's way bigger than me, way stronger. And then I go over, I get a bit closer to them and I realize I'm actually taller than him. And then I go sit on the bench and I'm like, I lift more than this. But and it doesn't matter how much we're lifting. That's not the point. It's just that what I'm getting at is that I, for some reason, feel that I'm lesser than everyone all the time. And so I don't know how that relates to the ego, but I think it's still a self-centeredness.
Right.
Because even though it's a negative self-centeredness.
Like this narrow focus that you think you are less than.
Yeah, but it's still about me, right? I'm still thinking I'm less than. I'm not as good as. I'm not as confident as. I don't look as good.
But then you tour the world and you play with all these like famous artists and you get on stage and stuff like that. How can you not have that? You know what I mean?
What, self-esteem?
Or ego?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Those experiences are quite different. Those experiences are very different. And I do think to myself that there must be something in me that believes in myself to some degree, because why would I write songs and then release them and put them out there for people to hear them? There must be something deep inside me that's like, I think you have something that the world needs or wants.
Yeah, and I feel like...
But I don't feel that way. Yeah. So it's a strange thing.
It's kind of weird.
I would say, though, that there's a guy called Henry Rollins. He's he was the singer for a band called Black Flag, and he's very into fitness and so on. And when you were talking earlier about the amount of weight that you're lifting and so on, he said something along the lines of that. The iron never lies. 45 pounds is always 45 pounds. And I do remember that there were times where I was in the gym and I would put weights on a bar and I would initially think, there's no way that I'm going to be able to move this. And maybe the first I didn't get it moved. But, we do progressive overload, that's like a common thing. So, you slap on your 210s because you can't lift anything else. And then the next time you go, or maybe a week or so later, you put an extra 2.5 on the end and you get that done. And then before you know it, you're moving weight that you would have never conceptualized that you could possibly move. I don't think the physical weight is actually that important. It's more what it does to you mentally to go like, it's possible
to move it. Someday
I could get this done. I mean, I guess there must be a limit to that. Otherwise, you'd be deadlifting buildings. But
right.
But there's still something about that
to push past.
That gives you the. I know for me with my when I first got out of this psychiatric ward on the hospital, I had been put on some medication that had caused me to gain a lot of weight. I was 227 pounds at my highest weight. and I'm 5'11", so that was I was quite heavy. And then I decided that I was going to go to the gym every day. 5 days a week.
Yeah, I remember seeing you go.
Yeah. And I didn't have a car. I didn't have any transp. And so I was walking from my house to the gym every day. And that had me walking on the highway.
Yeah.
So it was a 45-minute walk there and a 45-minute walk back. When I first started doing that walk, there are times that I got to the gym and I simply did not have energy to do anything else. And I sat there just feeling like a piece of garbage.
Yeah.
And then I walked back home. And then eventually, at one point I was so heavy that the pain, by the time you've walked 45 minutes, on a hot highway, my knees were just, oh man, it was bad. But eventually I kept doing it and I lost 20 pounds. And then I remember when I got down to 207, it's so funny, our view of ourselves, because prior to going into rehab, I was like 155 pounds. So I was pretty skinny. And I remember there's never been a point in time in my life where I've looked in the mirror and thought, you look good. And I remember being up at 227, coming down to 207. I remember looking in the mirror and being like, you know what? This is probably the best I will ever get. So this is good enough. And then I came down. I kept coming down. And it's not really so much about the losing the weight, but it was the fitness that was happening because I started to be able to lift the weights. And I when I came in, I couldn't do a pull-up. I couldn't pull that weight. Yeah. But over time, I did the assisted until I got to the point where I could do the pull-ups. And yeah, slowly I got there. And I do, I find it so interesting because I remember getting to, I had lost about 60 pounds. And I remember looking in the mirror and thinking, okay, like that's pretty good. And I would tell you within a week, I was like, you look terrible. And I realized then that this had nothing to do with my weight or how heavy I can lift or how long I can run for, or it's got nothing to do with that. I got some stuff to fix.
Yeah. What's funny? It was only 2 or 3 years ago. I actually looked in the mirror and was like pleased with what I saw. That's kind of, that's kind of like, really? But there was only, I would say about 2 or 3 years ago that I actually stood and be like, you know what? Like, you kind of look good. And I kind of verbalized it out loud. That was the first time I said it to myself that you, based on what you could physically see, body and all that, you look good. I don't think I've said it much since then, but I think that was
apparently
the first
thing. You should.
You should, yeah. So
I've been going through some therapy for some other things, and the therapist and my counselor from the rehab, they've told me so many times, you need to do affirmations. And first of all, they told me, you gotta learn to love yourself. And I was not ready for that at all. I was like, no. I do not love myself, and we're not getting into that as a discussion. That's not going to happen. And the thing is, they were like, you need to look in the mirror and tell yourself that you love yourself. But the thing about that is I couldn't even get the words out at first. And then...
Is that not... I know people say not to cross you and to cross you, but if we kind of like segue back to the ego thing, is that also like some sort of egotistical nature that men typically portray in terms of like verbalizing that they love themselves, or like verbalizing to themselves like maybe they look good or something, or even I guess we could get to this later, like checking in yourself into rehab, knowing that you actually have something that you want to deal with, but thinking just because maybe I'm a man or whatever, that I'll just get over that, or don't have to say these things because,
I think for me, it was kind of a perfect storm of multiple things because I think on the one hand, the type of personality that I was has always been a giver and not comfortable with taking. I always remember.
That sounds like a line you said in one of your songs. Sorry, that was it.
Maybe I don't remember. I remember my gran telling me this story about when I was a kid, and it was kindergarten, and we had a race, and they started the race, and I started running, and all of us started running, and I was ahead of everyone, and I realized I was ahead of everyone, and I stopped, and I let everybody pass me, and then I continued running. So this is something that's been in me for a long time, where I feel like I don't know, like I don't want to take up too much space. I just want everybody else to be happy. I want to make sure everybody else is good. And I think it's fine to want everyone else to be happy, but I think you kind of have to want it for yourself as well.
Yeah, like home runs beat first, right?
Yeah, but that's been very, very difficult for me
to do.
Yeah. And then even with these affirmations that I've only actually started doing in the last 2 weeks. So this is funny because I've been being told to do this for like 5 years. But I started doing them, and I happened to speak with the therapist, and I was like, I'm having an issue here where I'm saying the words, but I don't believe them. I'm looking in the mirror and I'm saying, I am confident. And like, no, you're not. So she was telling me, okay, so you got to take like baby steps with it.
Yeah.
You have to actually write affirmations that you could possibly believe.
Right.
So it might not start with, I love myself. It might start with, I don't think I'm that bad.
But just like in the gym, right? Mm-hmm. Everything with the
progressive
affirmation should be a little progressive.
Well, let's hope.
I remember like jumping head first into these things, right? And I would see like all these like these YouTube videos, and I would like bombard my day sometimes with these motivational videos and speeches. Like, I need to start my day with this so that I know that I am strong and I'm confident going into the day, right?
Yeah.
And then halfway through the day, I'm like, I don't believe any of that stuff that I was listening to, so I don't know. And I was the person that would load my WhatsApp stories with like all these like positive affirmations because I think maybe people will need to see it, but I really think that if I put it out there, then it reflects some way on me, right? And then I remember like I would start, when I actually got into vision boards, I would like write these affirmations at the top, and I was like, if it's right there and I see it every day, then it works. And I was like,
I haven't done a vision board yet. Does it work?
For me.
Yeah.
But sometimes when I don't get the something done by a said date, then I feel like I'm a failure and I start crumbling. It crumbles all over again, right?
Right.
Because I would set something, and I would have like these high goals and these things I need to achieve in a certain time frame, right? And I always figured that, if I set a date and that's definitive, it can't change, right?
Right. So you don't have any grace for yourself.
I have zero. Funny enough, because I got patience tattooed on my hand, I have zero when it comes to myself.
Listen, the things I have tattooed on me, they are reminders, right? Like, I have things on me that I recognize that's not how I am.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping.
It's like maybe if I like look at my right forearm a little longer, then I will start to get some patience for myself. And
if I see it enough, it might work. It might.
You know what I mean?
Let's wait and see.
Like I said, I would set these dates.
Let's be patient.
Touche. I would set these dates and nothing happened. But talk to me about low self-esteem. Yeah, you say you always battle with it?
I've always had low self-esteem, yeah. And I don't know.
So nothing to do with the music. It came before?
Yeah. How do I say this? I think it just was always there, but I think that something that happens with people who have low self-esteem is that, well, it doesn't necessarily only happen. I think in general, people attract things that are in line with what they believe about themselves, and I think I attracted things that were in line with what I believed about myself. And
I believe that too, but I also heard this thing in a podcast, and just paraphrasing. It was basically saying what you kind of grow up to be a person, but you don't learn to be. You don't grow up with the low self-esteem and stuff like that is almost in a self-talk. And they were kind of like trying to get back at the fact of it being something that you learn from seeing your parents interact or close family members. And then you go into society, and then all of a sudden it's all these things that come. Like, what do you think about that?
Well, as I said, I'm in therapy. So here's without getting too deep into anything, I don't remember a lot of my younger years, and I think there are good reasons for that. And yeah, things happen, and sometimes we don't even realize, how much something has impacted us. I mean, I know for me there are things that I just completely blocked out, and then those things manifested themselves in the form of addictions and illnesses and all kinds of other things.
But you kind of started in the church, right? Yeah,
kind of.
Kind of. So.
Well, I didn't. So my parents became Christians when I was about 10 or 11.
I always want to reiterate this. I say always, but this is literally second episode. But in the first one, I mentioned, and I want to touch this a little later, but in the first one, I mentioned that I think a part of self-help for men is actually finding like some sense of spirituality or being grounded in something, right? And again, this is for my aunt if she ever sees it. This is not a religious podcast, but I understand that being a whole being, right? We have like a physical, an emotional, a spiritual side, right? So, is there like a belief system that you have right now, or is it still Christian? What is it?
I do have a belief system now, yeah, but it's very loose. It is. When I say it's loose, it is more so that I'm open. I'm very open. And so in recovery, there's a couple of things that they say. There's these 3 spiritual principles that you must have. And it's honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And so I try to practice those 3 principles.
It sounds like the 4 agreements.
All of these things come from somewhere, right? Yeah. And I think there are some universal truths as well. And so I think practicing those principles has been really good for me because it challenges me on a regular basis. When someone believes something that I don't believe, it challenges me to not judge them so quickly. To sit and go, well, that's not in line with how I see the world. But that doesn't mean that how I see the world is the only way to see the world, or even the best way to see the world, But I do have a spiritual life today, and for me, it's important. I think it's important for humanity on a whole. Having said that, I'm not certain. I think there are many ways to discover spirituality, and I don't think anybody has a monopoly on it. So I think it's wonderful if you can find that in church, but I don't think you're a bad person if you can't find it in church.
Is Christianity still a big part of your family?
My family, absolutely, yeah. I've had my struggles with that over the years.
Yeah, I remember in one of the podcasts, you actually said that you find yourself like drifting away from God or distancing, paraphrasing.
Currently, I don't feel like I'm drifting away from God, but
I mean, your last album sung a little got a little Christian feel to it. Yeah.
So that was something that I was talking about in the documentary. That I grew up leading worship I grew up. That was how I was learning music. I learned from mainly from a lady called Cynthia, who used to. She was a counselor at a missionary base here called Youth of the Mission. And that's how I learned to play guitar. Well, largely, and so I grew up leading worship, and so I think it just naturally comes out when I'm writing songs, and it's something that I purposefully was trying to get away from for a long time. But with this last album, I just leaned into it because I was like, you know what? These are worship songs. It's just, I want anybody to be able to worship using them. Yeah.
Fun fact, I played in church too. Yeah.
What'd you play?
Trombone.
I was going to say tuba, but...
Tuba? I look like a tuba guy.
I don't know what a tuba guy looks like.
Usually when people say tuba or you think tuba,
like
you think like
massive,
you think like a bigger guy or something
trombone,
like a lot.
I've never played trombone, but recently I did a recording with a guy playing a conch shell, and I didn't even attempt to play it because I had a trombone player with me, Jomo, and he could not get this conch shell to work. So I do have a respect for brass players and
I never wanted to play, to be honest. I got it. I picked it up in school, and I always was fond of the keyboard, fond of the drums. There were so many keyboardists. There was a few drummers, and all the other sections like sax and stuff that was filled. I remember the music teacher, he was going, Brian Cole. He was good. Yeah, we could just get a second trombone. I was playing second to, Kieran Prescott?
I don't think so.
He plays trombone too.
Okay.
And I was talking to him. And I was just like, I don't want to play this.
Yeah.
And then after a while, it kind of grew on me. So then I took it to playing. I guess, played in cadet band sometimes. And then from there, tried to do a little BDF thing. I realized that probably wasn't for me. But and after that, it made its way to the church. Had a little church band, a little ensemble. But then it kind of, my love for music kind of died off after that.
Okay.
But yeah, fun fact. I see in most of your interviews, even speaking before we started, one of the biggest things that came up was depression and anxiety. And I know we talk about depression and anxiety, and you spoke about it in yourself. But I really want this conversation and the rest of these interviews to be somewhere like helpful to men, right? Given the stuff that you've been through, and we don't need to rehash all of it, but rehab and seeing guys come in and maybe go or whatever, and as you said, even to come like even greater things. Yeah, like you still think there's like a great stigma attached to people, I guess, owning up to having or like going through depression and anxiety as a man in society. There's like societal pressures on top of that for us to like, I guess, accept it. I know for some cases, or as we discussed before, that you need to be diagnosed, so to speak. But I think by seeing the way that people interact or people behave in society, it's clear to say that there must be something not terribly wrong, but it's something that you're not dealing with.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think you necessarily need a full-on diagnosis because, obviously there's a difference between someone like myself who has bipolar disorder,
right?
And other coexisting mental health disorders. Those needed diagnosing because they needed medication. But I mean, people go through periods of depression. Some people don't, which is incredible. I would love to just have some of those genes.
I really want. I really want to.
There was a guy that I used to do bass lessons with, and he was like, "Yep, I've never felt depressed." And I was like, I was like, "Wow." He's
good
like, "Yeah, never, ever. No, my life is so good." And I was like, I need to figure out how to do that. No, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the thing has always been that, men need to suck it up and kind of, just push on through. Yeah, and I mean, I'm not saying that we should fall apart constantly, but I do think, you know, there's a huge value in acknowledging how you're feeling. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to run down to the psychiatric hospital and be like, I'm depressed. It could just be that you need to sit with your feelings and figure out what's going on. Feel them, you know?
Yeah.
I think for me, though, I don't know how to say this, but I never felt like a man.
You never felt?
When I to be clear, I am a straight man. And I am aware of that.
Right.
Right. I have given that thought. I have sat down and thought about it. And I'm fully aware that I am a straight man. But I've always been very artistic, very sensitive, very soft, very... just a lot of things that, like, I remember growing up, there were times where my gran and my parents would be like, you need to toughen up. Like, you can't be so soft all the time, you know? Like, I was I think a very easy child to deal with because I was very placid. I would go and read in my room by myself. Nobody had to check on me. I didn't really go and play with people or anything. I just wanted to sit down by myself, read my books, make my drawings, make my music. And I think being an artistic person comes with a level of sensitivity. I continue to be very sensitive, way more sensitive than I'd like to be. But smallest things affect me, which is a gift when you're trying to create. But it's a tough way to go through life. Everything hurts all the time.
All the time.
And then I've always been, you know, I've always been very soft. Like, bad things happen to me and I don't go, I'm going to push everyone, like I'm going to shut everything out. I think the artist in me is like, no, don't shut it out because you need it as fuel. And so, but because of those things, you know, I remember being told as a kid, you need to stop being that way because that's not how men are.
Right.
And so then, you know, I think I grew up feeling like I wasn't really one of the men. But
here's the irony in all that. If it is ironic, because people say that, right? This is not what a man is supposed to be, right? And then when men go out and present these, that have like these bravados or these violent episodes or whatever, it is narrowed down to not being able to regulate those same emotions correctly and not being able to talk to people about these things and not able to express yourself, not necessarily in a soft way, but just at all, right? I know you have all these guys just doing all these things that may seem unpleasant because they don't know how to cope with all these things. They don't know how to speak about what they're actually going through because you've been taught from so long that's not how man is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Right? And I know that for some people, this may not necessarily be hitting home the way that they want, but like I said in the beginning, they see us and they see you, especially because of all your tattoos. Now, I know people don't necessarily generalize having tattoos and stuff, especially one on your head, as being soft. Like that's like it takes like some sort of fortitude to go through having the pain.
I'm a strong person, but I'm a soft person.
Exactly. And I think being able to toggle that and again being able to regulate these emotions makes you a better man and makes you a better person in society.
Well, something that served me well when it comes to tattoos is that if you're in a lot of emotional pain, a little physical pain is like nothing.
Right? I don't go as much as you, but I found that out too, right?
Yeah, no, I was actually told that by a therapist recently. She was telling me that as we begin to process those emotions and you begin to shed some of that pain or transmute that pain, that stuff is going to start to hurt more.
Right.
Like this, you're not going to be able to do this as much. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I guess get the tattoos now then.
You're right.
Yeah.
I mean, I also when I can't get a tattoo, I translate that to the gym, which is obvious, right?
Right.
It makes sense,
Right.
because then the pain only lasts for just about a time, right? Like a deadlift and a squat is only gonna hurt for that small period of time, unless something crazy goes wrong, right? But
Yes.
it's not the same, or it doesn't hold the same weight as carrying around like an emotional burden, or you're overthinking, or you're worrying. That weight is heavy on my mind and on my that weight is heavier for me.
Well, I'm not sure if this is just an acceptable form of self-harm or if it's something else.
I think it is.
It may very well be. I have found for sure. Now, obviously, you're a significantly more fit person than I am. I work out.
Thank you.
Listen, people, I lift weights 5 days a week, but I have a dad bod and it's not going anywhere.
I slowly transitioned to one of them. Well, yeah.
Go for it. Well, yeah. So I have found the exercise to be very, very helpful, for sure. It does help me to regulate, and I find walking to be really helpful as well. Some people like running. I just don't like running, but I do love to go for a walk. The only thing that I would say is that for me, exercise alone isn't enough.
You see, that was my next question. 'Cause I was going to ask you, how do you cope with this now? I'm not really advice, but what other ways will you give guys to cope with stuff like that? I find walking is definitely one. I used to do it a lot, like just randomly just pick up and walk somewhere. I don't do it as often now, but it's so funny how just taking in nature. And I mean, that was even before I found therapy and before I found all the other stuff. But it's so funny how just doing that and just noticing things, or just being alone on the road or whatever, just walking, it's kind of calming.
So where I live, a lot of people actually come there to walk. Because there's a lot of like streets that are, I mean, essentially they're not main roads, right?
Right.
And there's a guy that I pass every now and then and we chat. And the other day he said, I haven't seen you for a while. And I was telling him that there's a path that if you go down, it basically leads into a field and there's no one there. So I was like, well, I go there because I don't want to see anyone. So I'll go there and I'll walk for 2 hours and come back. And I haven't seen a person and I just feel so good. And he just started laughing. He was like, so you just don't want to see anybody? And I was like, yes, that is correct. And it's funny too because, I do need my solitude and I need to take in nature alone. And I am an isolator. I don't want to be around people.
Yeah.
But I will say, in recovery, I've been forced to be around people because I got to go to these 12-step meetings and I dread it and I don't want to be there. And I leave and I realize I needed that. Given the choice, I will always choose to not be around people. But I realize that we do need community. We are not single cell organisms.
This is something I learned too. You said something in another podcast where it was just the physical appearance, like, tattoos and stuff, which would, invite people asking questions, right?
Yeah.
So here I am, like, lifting all this weight on social media and doing all these things, and then when people see me out and go like, that's a Breadfruit guy, like, sometimes I'm just like all like very like no emotion.
Yeah.
And like my girlfriend and some other people that would be around me saying like, like, sometimes you just have this face and you probably should like just be a little bit more inviting so people can actually talk to you. And that's kind of like a little like rock and a hard place, right? Because I do want people to talk to me. sometimes.
Okay. Sometimes, yeah.
Other times I just feel like I really want to be by myself, but it's hard to like translate that to some people, especially when you deal with all these things, as you said, going on in your mind and self-esteem and all this stuff, and then trying to be that person. But I position myself in such a way on social media that like, you know, I have to.
I think I've done what a lot of artists do, and I always see it anytime I do interviews on radio. Radio announcers are very good at this as well. And coming up next, and then Mike goes off and they're like, yeah, what do you want to talk about? It's like we switch into a character.
Yeah, like you put on a show or a film.
Yeah,
right?
so I'm fairly good at switching into character. But I've been attempting recently to be less of a character and be more just who I am.
Yeah.
But then it's to figure out who you are.
I feel like if we had like a little audio or something, it should like cue or give you like a little drum roll for that, because I feel like that is what this is, right? This whole Barbell conversation is to bring who I am really to, you know, public. And people see me lifting and stuff, but usually with music and stuff with all of this and never really getting to understand me or hear my perspective or hear me speak for a long period of time or anything, let alone mental health. So I feel like, yeah, I do agree with that.
So the thing is that part of who you are is the guy that lifts the really heavy weight.
That is a part, yeah.
It's just not the whole of who you are.
And the whole of who I am, I think, and when you mentioned it being soft, I don't necessarily think I was soft. And I think we will get into more of that stuff as we discuss the other things that we dealt with. But I always felt as though like these things or the way that I would react to certain things isn't typically the way that other men might react. And because of that, I just want people to see me lifting. I just want people to see me being strong, right? Because all these other things I deal with, men shouldn't be dealing with. And then as I got older and as I drifted off into other things, then you realize that, you know, that view is very, you know, not the way to think, kind of.
Yeah.
Like microscopic, that's like a small view.
I think you know, masculine identity is such a strange thing too, because I have gathered from, I work with a lot of women, artists, musicians. I have a lot of women around me, and I gather from them that a lot of men are not safe people to be around. And that's I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
And we have to do something about that. But I don't know. I don't know what. I don't know what, because this isn't so much on the safety side of things, but more so just on male roles. Like, about a week and a half ago, I take my kids for a walk on the boardwalk twice a week, usually. Yeah. So I pick them up from school, we have some dinner, and we go for a walk on the boardwalk. And someone saw me with them and stopped me and said, "Oh, you know, it's so nice to see a man out here walking with their children, you know, like it's such a good thing that you're doing, and like fathers just don't do this." And I understand it was meant to be a compliment, and I'm grateful for that. But I thought, how sad that you feel like you need to give me a medal
for just
being what I'm supposed to be. Right. I am a father, so it's my job to look after my children, and part of that is doing things like taking them for walks and getting to know them, because when we walk for an hour or so, and they talk the whole time. And I learn who they are, and I learn their interests and what they're into, and And it's just not a struggle for me because I like who they are. I like
so is that then something that is lacking? And it's like a two-part question. If it is lacking, do you think, because I remember speaking to a psychologist, counselor, I think she's a psychiatrist now, I'm not sure. Don't want to call her name because hopefully maybe I can get her to talk again to me sometime.
Okay.
But I remember she said to me, and I understood what she said when she said it, but she said not everybody needs therapy, right?
Oh, I would hope not.
I definitely hope not.
Yeah.
And not everybody needs like a psychiatrist. But do you think in cases like that, where guys definitely can't connect with their children, especially now in times of this, where people seem to be getting children at pretty young ages, so I guess they themselves haven't really even dealt with all these things that we spoke about, haven't even dealt with regulating emotions.
Right.
So it's a case where that is lacking in society, being able to connect with just young men. And then on top of that, like, do these men need to seek therapy? Do these men need counseling, or would you advocate it?
I really don't know. I really don't know. I've had these conversations with a few different people. And I should say, first of all, I am not some kind of super dad, Like, I'm a good dad.
Right.
But I've had my struggles too, and certainly for the period of time that I had to be, that I had to get well, when I was in rehab and so on, it was very, I was in rehab during COVID. It was almost impossible for me to interact with my children. It was impossible at times. I'm a good dad today, and I think I was a good dad prior to that. But I'm just a man that's doing the best that I could do. That's the way that I look at it. But in terms of, right, so I was having this conversation with my friend Tanya Stevens, and we were talking about it, and she brought up something that was interesting. She said, so many of these men that are not safe men to be around and are not doing what they should be doing were raised by mothers and grandmothers. And they didn't have fathers. And so that makes it into a whole other conversation, because it's like, the men in your life didn't raise you.
Right.
And somehow the women in your life raised you in such a way that you don't respect women.
It definitely is another conversation. I don't want to march towards if I say this. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, right?
That's not even a position that I hold on
exactly.
That. It just is a thing that because as I say, Tanya's who's bringing this up to me. And she's mentioned it publicly as well. But it is a question. It's like...
But then like, how... Okay. Again, and I don't want to step on toes when I say this, but then doesn't it make sense that if you're just being told by women how to be a man based on whatever their perception of what a man is, but there's no man to represent whatever, then it kind of makes sense how these people go about life unregulated in their emotions, not being able to do anything, not being able to be fathers to the kids because you never really had a representative in your life to say, well, as a man, as a father, a good man and a good father. Again, forget being a super dad or whatever, but just being steadfast in your role. Like, this is what you should do or aspire to be, and maybe that helps. But I think the lack of father figures is probably a big reason for it. Again, not trying to get too far down that rabbit hole, but it definitely...
Yeah, I really don't know.
There definitely has to be a correlation to it, right?
Yeah.
If you were present in his life, then it probably would have turned out different. And maybe there are statistics in that, and we can get into that as we go along. But I did read an article recently that said that a lot of the guys that end up in these violent situations usually come from like broken homes or households that don't have.
If I'm not mistaken, statistically speaking, often your likelihood of being physically abused goes significantly up if there are men in the household. So So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not the one to speak on that, and I definitely don't want to speak on it if I don't have the statistics about it. But it's a very interesting conversation, especially when you like consider certain things, put certain things in context, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to drug abuse, something that I don't want to make myself to sound like a drug addict, but just being open about it. We had conversations before. Dealing with depression and anxiety has been something that has been plaguing me for quite some time, right?
Right.
And the way that I got over that was with the use of marijuana, right? I think some people hearing this, it may be a shock to them for the first time, and some people may have already known. But maybe just the fact that I was using might have been something that they know, but not why I was using. And we spoke before the podcast started about chasing this high and all that stuff. But I always felt like it was a way that I could cope with depression and anxiety. Do you think, I know you had conversations prior to this about your drug use and stuff like that and being an addict, but do you think that weed in itself is like a gateway drug to that, or was it a gateway drug for you?
I don't know. I mean, I certainly have friends who've been using marijuana for quite a long period of time. It seems to not be overly detrimental to them. They seem to be okay.
Yeah.
And you know, I've said it before that drugs are not the problem; they're the solution. So you're not doing you doing the drugs is usually not the issue. It's whatever you're trying to deal with by using the drugs. That's the real issue. So at the end of the day, you want to deal with the issue. Now, I do have I have close friends who use marijuana. Some use alcohol. But I would say that the way that they use it, it doesn't appear to be having majorly detrimental effects on how they live their life. It's not really for me to say whether it's the healthiest or best way to deal with things, and it may not be. I think the statistics on marijuana versus alcohol are quite different, because I think alcohol in general is just not a great plan.
Yeah.
Marijuana is a bit different. I'm a bit split on the weed thing, because I do know people that have smoked weed and gone into psychosis. So there is danger. I think sometimes marijuana is spoken about as if it is this very, very safe drug that
just recreational,
right? Nothing bad can really happen. If you smoke weed, you're just gonna lie down at home and eat pizza.
I definitely had that mindset for a long time.
Right. So I think it's not that I'm saying that it's an unsafe drug. I think it's just best that people know all of the information so they can make decisions for themselves.
Yeah.
Because some people do get addicted to even marijuana. I didn't even think that was a thing when I was personally smoking a lot of weed. I didn't think it was possible to really get addicted. But it's funny that I thought that, because when I look back on it, I remember there was a few times that I was like, I'm gonna just try and go to sleep without smoking weed tonight.
It's the worst thing.
It's 3:00 in the morning and I'm driving around to a block and I'm trying to find somebody who's awake that will sell me some weed, because I can't get to sleep, you know. And I think, oh no, I don't have a problem. You know, it's just weed. So for me, it was an issue. I absolutely needed marijuana for multiple things. I couldn't sleep without it, and I also just couldn't deal with my anxiety without it.
I definitely found that I couldn't sleep, as you said. I can't deal with anxiety either. But what I realized that it made me, and you mentioned this in another podcast, not necessarily linked to weed, but what weed made me is very high functioning. So like, it got to a point where certain strains or certain things that we use was not giving me a high, But the more I smoked, the more I was just like zoned in on certain things, and I was just like not doing anything else, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Well, maybe I don't have a problem because when I smoke, I seem to be very okay in society.
Right.
So
yeah, well, I discussed that last night. What a functional addict is. I'm not saying you're an addict, by the way.
Appreciate it.
I because I can't
I
make
understand.
that statement. But for me, I was extremely functional for a very, very long time, and all that means is that I was able to do all the things that I was supposed to do while high.
Right.
Because for me as an addict, there was no question as to whether I was going to get high. It was more a question of what I was going to do when I got high. But I was always capable of carrying out all the functions that needed to be done. And actually, I was thinking about this recently. I still struggle with this insomnia at times, and it's funny.
Yeah.
I had a bunch of work to do the other day, and I was explaining to someone that I would get to their project as soon as I possibly could, but it probably wouldn't be within the next few days.
Right.
And then because I couldn't sleep, I worked on their project, and I sent them a bunch of stuff, and they were like, "Oh, this is amazing," and I realized that people might like you as a functional addict if it essentially benefits them,
Right.
And this is not me making a negative statement about this person, but I can imagine that I've told you I won't be able to get to your project till next week, and then you wake up in the morning and I've sent you all this stuff, and it's like, oh, this guy is great. But this guy isn't great. This guy can't sleep. So there is a real danger with functional addicts because nobody thinks you need help.
I don't even think when you use weed the way that I used it, or for the purposes that you used it, and again, creating the narrative in your mind that because I haven't slipped away into heavier drugs, it means I'm okay, right? But I guess it begs the question, like, are you really? Because I remember, I don't want to say this, but I was at school. I'm not gonna call it school because when I was at school, was doing working on some projects or working on some things, and I was just getting very like anxious. And I know because had I been at home, my routine would have been I smoke in the morning, I go to the gym, I come home, do what I need to do, get to school, come back, and then if I need to do my schoolwork, I go through that, I take a break, take a small break, and I get back at it. I don't sleep or anything, smoke, whatever. And it started to show. So I had to get out and just go smoke, right? And then when I came back, I just sat head in the computer and was just working straight on. And it started to create this thing where people would say, well, after a certain time, like Dwayne reacts a certain way, he needs to smoke. But then when he comes back, he's very smart. He's very good.
Right.
So it's like, they loved the fact that when I came back, I was good and I was working and I was ready and I was functioning. But
so it was helpful.
Is it really?
So, I mean, yeah, I don't know, because the thing is, that sounds quite similar to maybe somebody who has ADHD. ADHD patients are usually medicated with stimulants, which have a different effect on the ADHD brain than they do on the normal brain. But essentially, they're given amphetamines. So I don't know. Should they be treated that way? Because I think a lot of times what's happening is that you're trying to squeeze all different types of people into the mold that society works under, right? So maybe not everybody's supposed to get to work for 8 and leave at 4:30. Like maybe there are some people who need a little more space, or we don't all kind of fit the box.
Fit in our own box.
And so I think a lot of times what we're doing with the drugs and the medications to some degree is we're just trying to squeeze everybody into a spot where they could fit into the box, which is probably not the healthiest thing, you know?
So are you still anti-drugs?
I'm not anti-drugs at all. No, I've never been.
But why not? Having seen what it's like done to you and peers and stuff, why not develop that mindset or mantra or whatever?
Well, you know, I've broken up with people and been broken up with, but I don't feel like no one should ever be in a relationship. I have met people who can buy a gram of Coke every 2-3 months, go out on the weekend, have a nice time, sleep it off, return to normal life. I've met people who, when I was in the UK, it was pretty common. You'd meet people who go out to raves. They take ecstasy, they take ketamine, these are hard drugs. And they do that every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, once a month, whatever. And then they return to their normal lives. And there are dangers, there's not really a safe amount of cocaine to do. There are no medical benefits to cocaine. There's no good amount of ecstasy to take per se. Well, maybe if it was regulated, but it's not.
Right.
So there's danger. Having said that, I wouldn't want to say like nobody else is allowed to do this because if I do it, it's a problem. Like for sure, weed is one, right? Where I see that marijuana can have medicinal benefits for some people, and I certainly wouldn't want to be someone who's going to be like, well, because if I use weed, it turns into this thing. I don't want you to have pain relief, while you go through chemotherapy.
Right.
And that's crazy, right? I have close family members who have a drink or two every night. It's probably not the best thing for them, but I can appreciate that they can have a drink or two every night.
So everything with context and moderation, so to speak.
Context. The thing about the moderation aspect is like with some of these things, there isn't really, as I said, there's not really a safe quantity to do. So I certainly wouldn't like I hope my kids don't decide to do that because, I've been around the recovery scene for a while, and there are unfortunate circumstances where somebody does one line and that's the end. I don't want to like terrify my children and be like, that's gonna be you, but it could be, and we just never know who it's gonna be. So I hope that's not the route that they take, and I don't think it's the best route for people to take, but I don't want people to get locked up for it. I do think that that's crazy. You can still go to jail in Barbados for possession of marijuana. I think that's pretty insane.
But we're not going to get into that.
Oh, yeah, we are. Look, if you can walk into a gas station and buy a bottle of rum,
right?
I don't think that you should be locked up for really, any quantity of. Now, I do understand with harder drugs, there's other dangers and, there's so much more that goes on. I mean, there's a lot that goes on in marijuana as well, but having said that, I don't think people should be locked up for it.
Yeah. I don't think so either. So, Auntie, if you see this. Yeah, she probably will have me in that if she sees it, but that's fine. I got a broad back, so it is what it is. So you just to cap it off. So you think there is like still like a glamorization when it comes to that, especially in the like male communities? Because I think that is probably where. How should I put it? I think that's where men find therapy. I say that because drawing the links between yourself and myself, you started in a church, so to speak, kind of, and then you left. And I think I kind of had the same type of path and left. And I found trying to speak this way to people in the church, so to speak, it wasn't met with anything other than you need Jesus. I mean, and this is not to discredit faith or anything, but I think sometimes we kind of throw a blanket over our eyes in Christianity and in whatever faith. I think that just because you don't necessarily deal with a particular issue or you don't go through that issue, it means that you're not dealing with that issue too, right? And in that, the only way you can find resolve for this issue is through this faith, right?
Right.
But I think in recent years, studies have shown that this is not something. I want to choose my words carefully because I don't want to like throw shade on any faith or any religion here. But I think we need to look at it from a more mental health perspective to deal with the issue. Because the more people throw blind eyes towards it, I see people in church taking their lives. I see people in church leaving and being depressed and going down the route of drugs. People will ask me all the time. I remember actually being on a block this one time before it became normal. And this is not to say that I'm like this big block person, but it's to say that I was starting to find solace in certain areas that I was being, right? And I started to find that, and it started to feel therapeutic, the weed, and just having that sense of community, right?
Yeah, block is like talk therapy.
Exactly, right? But this is something I wasn't getting in church, and that's something that they weren't seeing. I remember going to a pastor at one point and telling him how I felt internally, and he would look at me and say, "You can't feel that way because you're just one person. Like, you can't feel like you're like having all these multiple thoughts, or you think that you're schizophrenic. Or you can't feel that way because you're one person. Read this passage of Bible or whatever, everything will be gone." Right?
So there's such a thing as religious trauma, and I had a lot of experiences that were. I probably could have received treatment significantly earlier on in my life, but the narrative at the time that I spoke with people in the church setting was that these issues must be popping up because your faith is not strong enough. You need to spend more time with the Lord. You need to pray more. You need to get more into the Bible. You need to have your quiet time. So you're doing something wrong. And essentially, right? Because it can't be God. God can't be doing something wrong. So it's got to be you.
Right.
And essentially what you're saying to someone is, you're depressed and that's your fault. And our solution for you is pray and hope for the best. And I think prayer is an incredible tool.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's the only tool that God gave us, right? Because if that was the case, God, like, there would be no need for so many other things, because whatever you need, you just pray.
Yeah.
And that's not how it actually works. But I think growing up in a setting where you believe that you are intrinsically bad, by the very nature of being a human, you are sinful. So you start out wrong.
Right.
And then you have these struggles, and they're your fault.
I know you got to claw your way out of all this to find, sincerity or this religion and try to...
Yeah, your faith is not strong enough.
Yeah.
That's why. I think that's extremely detrimental to people. It's interesting too, because I was so so deep in. Like, as I said, I was a worship leader, I was a youth leader, I was all these things. So I believed everything. I was fully like in. And I have friends who were a bit more loose with their faith. And in many ways, I think they came off better, because when people told them things like that, they were just like, doesn't make sense. And they just moved on. Whereas I was like, it is. Yeah, something's terribly wrong with me.
Right.
You know, I do kind of wish that maybe I'd had the ability to just be like, yeah, whatever. But I didn't at the time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you've been through all that. And again, when people listen to the other podcasts and they listen to the documentary, they'll understand all the stuff that we spoke about in more detail.
Mm-hmm.
But in totality, like, what does self-help for men, or especially for yourself, what does that look like for you?
Self-help.
Mm-hmm. You took yourself to rehab. You went back in.
Right.
How do you deal with this now, and how do you think that you help yourself? You know?
So, I mean, a lot of my... I'm not sure I would refer to it as self-help, because... So what I've realized is that for me, it appears that I have to take the first step. But I'm probably not the one who's going to make the entire journey.
Right.
So I had to take the step to speak with the psychiatrist. I had to take the step to ask to be admitted to, well, with the rehabilitation center, it was recommended by the psychiatrist.
Right.
But I agreed to go. I readmitted myself to the psychiatric ward the last time. So I had to take these steps. There are things too, like meditation, prayer, the affirmations I was talking about, although I feel kind of bad talking about them because I've only started doing them recently. But again, it's a thing that I'm doing. But I think I'm also aware that I need community. That I can't do everything alone. So a big part of me helping myself is me helping other people and me allowing myself to be helped by other people. And for me, that looks like 12-step fellowships, being of service in my community.
You mentioned the 12 steps before. So what is that really? What is that like?
12-step fellowships are the ones that end with anonymous. So obviously we don't discuss too much about it, but the 12 steps are basically, how should I put it? It's a path to a spiritual awakening. That's what it really is.
Okay.
It will get you to the place where you can have a spiritual awakening. And the reason for that, from my limited understanding, is that that's what it's going to take for you to be able to heal, particularly as a person with struggles with addiction. Although I do think that the principles behind the 12 steps could be used by anyone and be useful. And you mentioned before about the 4 agreements when I spoke about honesty, open-mindedness, willingness. Like, you got to bear in mind that the 12 steps didn't just like pop out of nowhere. You know, they came from different belief systems that already existed. I haven't done a lot of research into them, but I know that one of them was called the Oxford Group, and that had nothing to do with addiction or recovery. It was more of a spiritual religious organization. And they were essentially using the 12 steps, but just as a way of life.
Right.
And I think it is a very effective way of life because it is, if I can summarize it, and I you know, I'm new to this, but the first 3 steps are basically admitting that you're powerless and you're not in control of everything. Accepting that there's probably something greater than you that could help you.
Yeah.
And then being willing to allow that thing to help you.
Right.
And then step 4 and 5, you basically take a long, hard look at yourself, figure out all of the resentments and anger and bitterness that you have, all the ways that you've wronged other people, all the ways that you've been wronged, because resentments often come from things that, like, you didn't do something to that person, someone did something to you. They say for addicts, resentments is a no-no. Anger is the dubious luxury of normal men, is what the big book says. So you deal with those.
Right.
Then you... I'm trying to remember 6 and 7. I don't remember 6 and 7. But then I know that you then go on to figuring out if you need to make amends to anyone. Have you wronged anyone? Is there any area of your life where, you know, you could make amends? And then step 10 is basically you take a daily inventory. So you're constantly checking yourself. Are my motives good?
Right.
Am I doing this selfishly, or am I doing this out of love? Am I doing this for the betterment of the people around me? 11 is basically you're staying in constant communication with a higher power of some kind, with a spiritual life. And then 12 is just you're sharing that with other people. That's a summary. And, you know, the resentments part of it is a very difficult thing because, you know, there are times where I think something I had to learn was that me forgiving you doesn't mean that what you did was okay.
Right.
It just means I'm not going to poison myself because of someone else's actions.
Yeah.
And someone may not be sorry too. So you can't even expect, like, you may have hurt me on purpose and you're happy that you hurt me. So I can't expect you to even feel bad about it. But I still have to forgive you.
Because it's, as you said, it's more.
It's about me.
It's definitely for you.
Yes.
More so for me than it is for the person that you're trying to forgive.
And then, you know, I have to bear in mind that with the best of intentions, I've hurt people.
Yeah.
You know, really badly.
Yeah.
Without ever meaning to. But that doesn't mean that I didn't. I did. And then learning to make amends is a very interesting process, because my immediate thought, a lot of people, when they come into the 12 steps, they want to skip to that part.
Yeah.
They're like, I've done so many bad things. I need to go and say sorry to everyone. And they always tell you do the steps in the order that they come in, because you don't want to run out there and be like, Dwayne, I'm so sorry about that thing I did. And then 2 weeks later, you're drinking and you do the same thing to Dwayne again. He's going to be like, you're an idiot. You know, like, you don't care. So something I have been learning about making amends is I have a sponsor. So a sponsor is just someone who kind of takes you through the 12 steps.
Right.
Someone who's been there before. And he often talks to me about making living amends. And what it is rather than, you know, there may be people who don't want to hear you say sorry. And they wouldn't believe you if you said it anyway.
Yeah, I could think of a few points.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
And so what he was saying is, they don't want to hear you, so don't go and tell them, because they're not interested. What you need to do is make sure that the way that you live, when they look at you, they can tell that you're not that same person anymore.
Yeah.
Right? You're consistently doing the right thing over and over and over again.
Yeah. I find over the last couple of years and in more recent months too, like, there are things that I know personally that I've done to people. It may not all be inherently terrible, you know, like bad, but you know that you wronged somebody. And I think being the overthinker, the higher functioning, the warrior, and the sort of person that I can be, like, I tend to bottle all that inside, and I think, like, I need to show up in a way for this person, or tell this person that I'm sorry, or ask for forgiveness, even if it's profusely. I remember reaching out to somebody recently too and saying, like, I know that we don't talk, and going on this whole list, And she just looks at me. She's like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
That's past. But for me, it just weighs so heavy, and I feel like I need to go and apologize. And I know some people that think like this too, and it's good to know that, because I think we need to reiterate more so that this isn't for them,
right?
It's for you,
mm-hmm.
and this is something you need to get through.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, like the 12 steps, I think most of the stuff, obviously, as you said, it ends with anonymous. But I think in anything, there needs to be that realization and that admittance before you can even take the step to do anything else.
I saw something the other day, and I think it said something like, the best apology is changed action.
Changed behavior.
Yes. It probably was behavior. Yeah, that makes more sense. And it hit me hard because my journey in recovery in particular has not been a linear process. So there were times where I said to people, I'm doing my best, like I'm working on my, I'm doing all the things.
Yeah.
And I would relapse. And so my behavior had not changed. I genuinely was sorry, and those apologies were real, but I failed. And I've kind of had to give myself a little bit of grace when it comes to that, and realize that unfortunately, when you're dealing with something like the disease of addiction, or even with something like bipolar disorder, and I don't know if maybe this happens to normal people too, like just in life.
Normal people.
There must be some out there.
Yeah.
And I have to be careful about this, because, if you're in an abusive situation, someone's, abusing you. No, you shouldn't stick around and hope that they maybe change their behavior.
Tread those waters lightly.
Right. Yeah. Like, no, that's not a good plan. That's bad. But, I had to realize that those living amends are very important, because I have failed to live my amends at times, and I've been doing a better job for a little while, but I'm cognizant of the fact that I could slip up, I could make a mistake,
Yeah, that's true. Coming on to the community, because I think that's really important, and I think that's what I want this to develop to be.
Okay.
What does that look like? What does community for men look like? And I think the 12 pillars really should be like a pillar for something like that, given that men deal with so much, as we discussed so far. But what does that look like? What do you think these communities should try to represent or replicate that we can help these men better?
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I feel like the 12-step communities, that's the only communities I'm really a part of. There are places, like I go to the gym, but I wouldn't really say I have a gym community at present. There are people that I maybe see every morning, but like we don't necessarily have any kind of rapport outside of that we happen to be in the same place at the same time every day. We don't know anything about each other. And I don't necessarily think that we have to, but in the case of community, we do.
Yeah.
I think 12-step stuff is almost like perfect for me, because I'm someone who I skip small talk and go straight to like hardcore topics immediately. I'm like, all right, so you're suffering with depression.
Me too.
Right, let's get into it.
I said, don't ask me how I'm feeling, but you know what we should talk about today?
Yeah. So in some ways, that's really good for me, because essentially I'm with a bunch of people whose like lives are at stake.
Right.
So we don't have time to be like, oh yeah, I went to. It's like, and we're not talking about what movie we saw or like none of that. It's like straight into, because essentially, if somebody relapses, I mean, people die, right? So it's literally a life at stake situation. So community in that sense, that works great for me.
Yeah.
Community specifically for men, I'm not really sure. I don't even know. Like I don't have one, so I wouldn't even know where to begin or what to suggest.
Well, let the record state that Barbell Conversations will be the start for something like that, right? It will be the start for community for men and moving forward.
I would say there was a point in time where I wanted to like get people together to do things like camping.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be a cool idea. And I couldn't find anybody that was interested.
I don't think, it definitely needs to be something that speaks. But I think as things like that are creating, more people will become aware of it, and they'll probably like hopefully grasp or latch on to something like that. But I think everything now seems to be just around a certain culture, and I think it's trying to get out of this culture and then try to bring something different and new, like this podcast or even a camping situation.
Well, community for men is largely the block.
Exactly. But I found too, hence the name, I found community in the gym.
In the gym, yes. Yeah.
But the thing about those spaces is that people aren't always true. Right? So some men in the gym believe that we don't need therapy, for example. Or you don't need to talk about certain things because that's not man enough. And some guys might think that, the things that you're talking about, okay, but the way to resolve it isn't necessarily the right way that you should go about resolving that. Right? So it's like, there needs to be some semblance of, like, that is okay, but that's okay. But then we need to find the middle ground as into how these things can coexist. Like, how can you be the strong masculine man, but still feel those feelings and not have to retaliate every time you do it, or not have to, think about, I'm reading this book right now by Mark Manson, Everything is Fucked. He had one before. Yeah. And he was pretty much talking about the feeling brain and the thinking brain, just trying to separate the human into two, right? Haven't fully got too far into the book, but so far what I've understood is like, we think and we feel, but we always try to do something because it's logical to do it, or do something on impulse, but not understanding that the two need to kind of coexist and work together. And I think that's what he's trying to get at in the entire book. I haven't finished it as yet, but I kind of stood out because I feel like everybody thinks logically but acts on impulse, but not realizing that you can also think, about that same emotional side and try to work on the other emotions. It's okay to be emotional as a man, because emotions isn't just crying. You can have the anger, you can have the sadness, you can have the fear, you can have all that. But the thinking brain, the logical part, tells you how to cope and deal with these things in a logical manner rather than trying to act on impulse. And the feeling brain does that, right? Something angers you, I act on impulse, I need to go and do this. Then just reassessing the situation and having all these different things, and maybe even going through the same 12-step pillars gives you a better path at how to deal with these things,
Yeah. Delayed response can be very helpful. I'm not good at it. But I do see the value in it. Like, I think we cause a lot of problems by responding too quickly.
Yeah.
Responding when the emotions are at their height, rather than letting them settle, kind of regaining control.
Yeah.
And then seeing, okay, like, how should I actually respond to this now?
Exactly.
When you respond in the moment, it can be
very bad. Yeah. So coming to a close, on my way here, I saw this guy in the Zara van, and I think this probably is a good way to maybe just end it off. So it may segue a little bit, so just bear with me. So he got into the van, and it's one of those ZR vans that all the seats were taken up, but it had enough height that he could stand, right? But it's already packed, and you can see that he was in there. But he's this little boy, and he looked all nerdy and stuff. And he seems to have like zero spatial awareness. There's a lady standing behind him, he's rocking back on her and all sort of stuff. I'm like, look at this guy. But then you see him moving, like you can see all these people like trying to maybe like analyze him too, based on what he's going through, or based on what's going on in his space. He just wanted to get to the seat and everything. He's moving his bag, and the bag is like bumping on people's heads and stuff. And you can see people starting to get angry, right? And I could take myself back before all this now, and I could see myself as that same person, or him just not being very socially aware or having that low self-esteem, especially in a social setting, right? But he then grows up to be, you know, somebody that's either constantly battling with the anxieties, the depressions, the low self-esteem in a way that we have, or he grows up to be somebody else that doesn't emotionally regulate his feelings, doesn't get a hold of spatial awareness, doesn't, you know, deal with the stuff or the traumatic stuff that would have been going on, and then becomes quote unquote a menace to society, right? So I guess to end off, my question is, and I'm not saying that he is, I'm not saying that he isn't, but it was just an observation for me today. But my question is, like, what message then would you leave to like younger men in society? And you yourself are a dad, right? You yourself has 2 sons, right? So it's like, what message would you leave to these kids growing up to be the future men in society about self-help or self-awareness, or, you know, just loving yourself or having better self-esteem? I know we're still battling with that individually, but we still are trying to come out on the other side. And these guys now have to grow up to go through all that and live the experiences that we would have lived, or maybe be exposed to even different drugs when they get older, who knows? But like, at this stage, if they see this, like, what message can we tell these guys that may be battling from this age? Like, you know, it's okay. You don't gotta be right to be. You could take your time, but that's just something that I thought about today.
Yeah, I think what I aim to do as a dad is create a space where my kids feel safe, that they could tell me anything. That doesn't mean that they will tell me everything. And I think I have, in recent times, been trying to figure out the balance between, like, how much do I prod them if I know something is wrong? Because, for example, I could tell you my youngest son, there was a time a few months back where we were lying down in the bed together, and I could tell that something was wrong with him.
Yeah.
And he was like not crying, but he was holding in tears. So I said, "What's wrong?" And he obviously was ashamed that he was feeling this way. And I think also he may have been a little bit scared that he had done something wrong. And I certainly have never been one for any kind of harsh punishment. So I don't think that he expected that he was going to receive any kind of like blows or anything.
Yeah.
But I asked him what was wrong, and at first he was like, "Nothing." And I was like, "No, something's definitely wrong." And I gave him a little space, and then I asked him again. And I said, "You know, it's okay. You can tell me." And he had actually gone off the bed, and he had started writing something on a piece of paper. And he told me that he'd written down what was wrong. So I said, "Okay, can I read it?" And he said, "Yeah, that's okay." So I read it. And he had been on his iPad and he was playing Roblox, and he got an item and he thought that he may have bought it. And if he'd bought it, that would have meant that he would have used an adult's credit card to buy it. And he knows that he's not supposed to do that.
Right.
At least not without permission. So I said, okay, well, let's have a look. Let's see. So we went through it and he showed me what he got, and I checked, and it turned out that he was wrong.
Right.
It actually was a free item. I think he had gone to a certain point in the game and they gave him this item for free. And he was immediately so relieved. And I thought it was so interesting because I've definitely been there so many times where I've made this humongous deal out of something that actually turns out to be nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
But also, he needed a little bit of prodding to get to the point where he would say something. And so there's this balance between like, how much pushing do I do versus how much space do I give? Because there may be things that he doesn't want to tell me.
True.
So I think it's somewhere in between there is like creating the opportunities for the conversations. And we have to kind of keep creating them because sometimes people aren't going to take the first opportunity. So maybe we have to kind of keep giving people the opportunity. And then also the space has to be a space where people feel safe and comfortable enough to have discussions. And they know that, you know, they're not going to be laughed at or judged or punished or, you know. So something along those lines.
Yeah.
I
like that. And I feel we could probably end there.
Perfect.
Yeah. So this is just a shout out. Well, shout out to Kai for being here so late. Appreciate it.